think really one of the most interesting aspects of what I've learned about identifying when the creatures are present and how to identify when these huge creatures are present and blending in. You can see the bone structure here at work, catching sunlight that's been diffused, and then bone structures at work that are not catching diffusion, right? We've got diffusion hitting on the same colorations, but this is what that skin, this same exact skin looks just like this, sitting behind and under and in the diffusion. The value of examining film when we are actually shooting in valuable situations is incredible, because what we've learned over the years is that the movement of the camera generally represents a disturbance in the resolution. You'll get pixelation. There are exceptions to that rule, as we can see when we examine this particular frame. And that's the exception to the rule. Occasionally, as I pan or as I end a clip, I'll move the camera. I have a habit of moving it to my left. And over the years, that's gotten way more drastic and way more intentional. Because at the end of the clip, what I've noticed is with diffusion and the actual phenomenon occurring on their faces, in that movement where it's still recording, generally in the first few frames, I can break through some of that diffusion and get incredible views into what's really going on inside this bush. Whereas in the rest of the frames, it's like pretty much dog shit. You know what I mean? I mean, we're looking at it here and it sucks. And that's not going to cut it. So I've learned, that, I can find these creatures even when the camera's moving. And that has a lot to do with the fact that they're achromatically colored. The diffusion works against us 99.99% of the time. The times that the diffusion, actually we can cut through and get a view of it, in this frame is a perfect example, is when they're in direct sunlight or parts of their skull are exposed to direct or more direct sunlight, because as you reach the edge of the trees, you still see some green shade here, right? This is olive drab on part of the skull. And the part that's out in direct sunlight, and the line is very concrete here. We can see this. This is diffusion. That's called the diffusion line in research, right? Inside the tree line exists the diffusion line. Depending on the position of the sun, the diffusion line can extend outward based on the height of the trees. It will cast a shadow onto these creatures, and if that sunlight is passing through bright green leaves, the creature will appear light green. If he's in the shade somewhat and under green bush, he'll appear dark green and partially the natural coloration. But we can see here, we've got the gray tones and we've got the green tones, but he's in shadow diffused in green sunlight that's been hitting these plants above him. Now the individual above his head, we get a little more natural tone. We can see eyes peeking out all over here. And the top of this one's head, this is the eyes, and here's the top of his head, we get the hair. So what we're learning about the creatures from the single frame is a great deal, first of all, about the symmetry. And we need to examine this symmetry in depth, take our time, make notes on it. You can see the flexion in the musculature of this face. His face is full of muscles. What that tells me is at any given moment, this creature can change that face into something completely different, possibly even something that looks exactly like this. I've seen this over time on many occasions where they have this solid green tone and they're blending perfectly. And then according to where they're at and the position of the sun, we're in the morning sun here, and the sun is actually coming from this angle and a little bit forward, as you can see. We can see that sun line. boom, it's catching right here. The shadow of the tree is on these guys back here, and that's what's going on. But just looking at it, there's so much information contained here. We can see that some of these creatures have an apex that comes up a good ways, man, and then there's hair up on the top. This could be one of those elongated skulls that they talk about, L.A. Marzulli, right? This guy here appears to be more gorilla-like, obviously. We're dealing with the upright walkers, right? They can still shift onto their arms, right? Simulating quadrupedal, but these are walkers. Now, don't get me wrong, they spend most of their time sitting around on their ass in the shade, as you can see. This is 8:40 to 8:45 in the morning, probably, somewhere in there. And we've got a whole cluster of them. What else does this single image tell us? Well, they're observing us as a group from the shade, right? But these are strategic spots. If we take the crop off here for a second, the placement of these guys is strategic. We can see over in here in the corner. Here's that white skull. But just glancing, what do we see? We really don't see much. I mean, you really can't see much. Here it is, over here. You got to get in to really get an understanding. Look at this huge hominoid, man. We're getting the top of the head here, and look at the bone structure. It's immense. It's almost like a skull with skin on top of it. The musculature is so exaggerated on these faces. And squinting, man, he can open his face and look like this guy. Slip right back in the shade and look just like this. And then there are various types. It appears that there may be a small one down here. This could be a female, right? We're dealing with males and females. Is this the male? I don't know. There's a huge one up here. We know we've got the eyeballs poking out here. Probable nostril holes, right? We're looking. We can see. We have eyes. We can see what's being described here. We need to take this information into the field with us the next time we're in the field, right? These are X's that were on my map based on footage that my wife shot 5 years ago. I didn't go in the field with her on that expedition that I showed where we showed those giant creatures. This just happens to be the exact bushes those giant creatures were hiding in. We can see there are groups of hominoids. And if we understand the bone structure, we can see quite a few individuals hanging out here. We get the eyes. You can see that eye placement is not even close to human. A lot of people like to argue about the human side of this whole issue. And I was one of them for a long time. I'm yet to see a human in 10 years of footage. These are not human beings. These are a different species of man, yes. They're not human beings. Modern human beings use tools, have electricity, take baths, and they certainly don't have this type of coloration, right? This adaptation or this addition to their DNA, whichever way you want to look at it. The bottom line is we don't blend in like these guys. These guys appear to be way more suited, symbiotic in their relationship. They're definitely communal. We can see that from this single frame. There's a lot you can learn from a single frame. What I learned from frames that my wife shot 5 years ago, as I was stating earlier, is exactly where these creatures would be. In fact, 5 years later, my wife and I went in yesterday morning and filmed these creatures in the exact same spot. Thank you for joining in the field. Thank you for supporting us on YouTube, on Patreon. Everything you guys do to support the study, we're yielding critical data and understanding that hominology is a viable field science.